But pen and paper, that is the one that's probably been mentioned the most for various reasons.
Well, that's good, because I thought I was going to be really weird in like 1982. That's good. That makes me feel fine.
It's just retro. It's very modern, you know.
Yeah.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Jo is interviewing Laura Willis of Shine Offline. Jo and Laura met through the Engage for Success movement, where Jo hosts a weekly live podcast and Laura is booked in to join her on it in September. When Jo found out a bit more about what Laura does and how her business began, she realised that she'd make a great guest on this podcast too. A PR and marketing professional who was self-employed for 10 years, Laura launched Shine Offline in January 2016 with the aim of empowering people with the insight and skills to manage their digital technology in their lives in a more mindful way. The idea was born through her own experience of struggling to find a work/life balance and resulting burnout. Laura is now working with her colleagues to deliver sessions for teams to workshop the impact digital technology is having on their lives and discover ways to disconnect in order to better connect with themselves and the world around them. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Laura Willis of Shine Offline. Welcome, Laura. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Jo. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. And just telling you that I saw some snow out of the window. It's the end of April, but it's stopped now. So
I know. Well, it hasn't reached us yet. It's still sunny here.
And there we were thinking it was nearly the summer. So start by telling us a bit about you, what you do and where you do it.
Okay. Well, my name's Laura Willis, and I'm originally from Northern Ireland, as you'll hear. And my background is I was a self-employed PR, marketing and events consultant working from home for about 9 years. And very recently, in January, I launched a new business that has been inspired from my experience of not really being able to manage my work-life balance working from home, and a couple of episodes of what you could call burnout that happened to me over the past few years. So I'm now in the fortunate position of actually working in an office, which hasn't happened for a long time, so my life feels quite different. I'm still married to a man who works from home, so he's a graphic designer and spends all day in front of the screen. But he's very good at managing his time. He's the cook in our house, so I get a lovely meal cooked for me every night, and he's a graphic designer, so when he's waiting for sign off from a job, he can step away and go into the kitchen and get the cooking on, which is super.
Lovely. Doesn't quite work like that in our house. I don't quite get away from the computer in time to do the cooking. So I won't play this particular podcast to my husband.
That's probably a good idea. I think I'm quite rare in that sense.
So talk us through then. So you currently don't work from home, having done this a lot in the past, and it's the reason you don't and your new business are all very sort of intertwined. So tell us a bit more about that journey for you.
Okay, well, I went out on my own about 9 years ago. I was living in Northern Ireland with my English husband, and decided that, having been in PR marketing for many years as an employee, that I wanted to do my own thing. So he decided around the same time that he also wanted to go out on his own. So we ended up both working from home as two self-employed consultants. And the great thing was that we were able to collaborate a lot on projects. We worked together as well, which is cool. And then we'd moved back to Northern Ireland from London, where we had met because my father was unwell. He had early onset Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And we'd gone back to help my mum. And it was great because we were both self-employed, so we were managing our own schedules, and we were there to help Mum, who they only lived up the road. We were there to help them as and when she needed us. So the flexibility was super. And then Dad he was at home the whole time that he was unwell, but he got to the stage where we weren't really of much use to him, and they were having full-time carers coming in. And at that point, Ben and I decided we'd been back for about 5 years in Northern Ireland, and the businesses were going well, but we wanted to move back to London because we really missed it. All his family, a lot of friends were here. So we made the decision to come back, and we'd only been back in London about 2 weeks, and I was actually due to get on a plane to fly back to Northern Ireland for a client meeting, and my father died that morning. So I happened to be on the plane anyway and got back, and was then back in Northern Ireland for a couple of weeks for the funeral and all the rest of it. But then I was a bit all muddled because we'd only literally moved back to London, and I wasn't sure what to do. Came back to London anyway, and then hit a bit of a low, and was all over the place. I'd always been quite anxious around my work and quite stressed anyway, and the working from home thing had been a bit of a struggle, but I was finding it really difficult, and I was feeling really, really anxious. So I ended up one night Googling stress management or something, and a Google talk came up by a meditation teacher who's sort of the godfather of evidence-based mindfulness meditation in the States. His name's John Kabat-Zinn, and I watched the video. He was talking to Google staff at their annual conference, and it was all about living in the moment and the power of now. And I was really inspired because I was somebody who was always preoccupied with the future, always worrying about when the next project was going to come in, where the next money was going to come in, and this concept was just mind-boggling for me. And that started me on a journey through some meditation, and I did an 8-week course, and I went to a couple of conferences, and I started to meditate. We're using the Headspace app on my own, and I found it really helpful. The years passed, the business continued to develop. I was still living in London, but most of my work was in Northern Ireland. I spent a lot of my time working within the arts and culture sectors, and there'd been a lot of funding put into Northern Ireland, and they'd also won UK City of Culture, so I was inundated with projects back and forward like a yo-yo on the plane. I used to, I'm sure a lot of people who work from home can relate to this, I used to get up in the morning and go for a run, and I would get back from my run and I'd check my email, and then I'd get in the shower, and I'd come out of the shower, and in my towel I'd check my email, and then I'd get dried, and then I'd get dressed, and then I'd check. I was constantly, there was the break, the movement away from the computer, and the constant need for knowing what was happening next, either waiting for a client to confirm something, or waiting for a journalist to say they'd write an article, or waiting for approval on a piece of artwork. It was just constant, and that would have caused a lot of anxiety for me. So that was ongoing. And then I had my little girl, she's now 3.5. And I fortunately met a PR consultant locally who was able to come on board whenever I got really busy and help me out on projects. So for maternity cover, I was able to go off for about 4 months, but it got really, really busy quite quickly again. And Sadie was at home. She was only 4 months old, but because my husband was working from home as well, we sort of managed to throw her around the house between us. And I went back to work at 4 months and sort of managed it, although I think I had 12 projects on at once.
Wow.
But Anna, who was the local consultant who came on board with me, she was brilliant, and she's actually now part of the business. She had worked from home herself for many years, and she is now my business partner at Shine Offline, but we'll come on to that later. So anyway, decided I had to go back to work when Sadie was 4 months old, and I think I dealt with it okay looking back, but the meditation had fallen by the wayside, and I was flying backwards and forwards to Northern Ireland still, doing too many projects at once. My husband's very supportive and very available, and that was great. But then when Sadie was about 9 months old, she started to have seizures just out of the blue. And looking back now, I can see that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And at that point, I realised I couldn't do everything. And I had a real burnout and hit a real low. And I went to the GP, and we spoke about my sleep was well off track. That was the worst thing. My insomnia got really, really bad. And the GP, we had a chat and we talked about meditation, and he said, oh, you should maybe join a meditation group to keep the momentum going. A lot of people find that really helps, and the benefits with the meditation are quite similar to CBT. So I happened to find a group that was on that night in Twickenham, where I live, and I went along, and I was so nervous, but I went, and it was 2 hours long. I'd only meditated for about 10 minutes before, but it was brilliant, and I've been going ever since. So that started to get me back on track, and in the meantime, the whole grey area of working from home and not having my smartphone, which was my work phone, my personal phone, it was never off. I remember going on honeymoon and not taking the phone and feeling completely amazing for 2 weeks because I had no phone with me, and always harking back to that. But this constant, I was on all the time, and especially after my daughter was born, I became much more aware of my own behaviour around the technology in my life, and the work and personal. It was just all the same. It was one big clump, and it really stressed me out. So I started to make some changes. I got another phone, so I had a work phone and a personal phone, which meant I could turn one or the other off if I felt I needed to. I took the email off my phone, so if I wanted to access email, I had to go onto my laptop. I came off Facebook because I never really enjoyed being on it anyway, and I could find that, especially being self-employed, I could go online and then just be on, just end up lost in this Facebook puzzle muddle. Yeah. So I came off Facebook, and some of these changes started to I could really feel the benefits of them. And then over a period of about 6 months, I had friends and family in conversations, either bumping into them on the train or out for dinner. We would get chatting about tech and how prevalent it was and how connected they felt and how they couldn't get a break. And I started to share some of the stuff that I was doing with them, and people were listening to me and really like, oh, that's quite a good idea, and taking the ideas on board, and then coming back to me to say, I've done that and it's really helped me, thanks so much. And I was thinking, oh, this is really good, because I've got a background in psychology. I studied social psychology, and I've always had an interest in people and well-being, and so I thought, oh, I'm starting to help people here, this is great, as a bit of a sideline. And then I was fortunate to win a piece of work for The Guardian, so I had to travel in and out of London this is last May. I was travelling in and out of London days a week, which is lovely because I got to go into an office space and work with other people, which is amazing. But on the commute, which I'd not done in years, I noticed that everybody was on their phones constantly. And because I don't have email on my phone, and I'm not on Facebook, and I was proactively trying to meditate, I wouldn't necessarily have had my phone in my hand, but I noticed that I was quite unusual in that sense. And it just started to really strike me. Everywhere I looked, everybody was on their phones, and I'd not really noticed it before. And then one day I was travelling back from, I was travelling into The Guardian, and I was sitting beside a girl who was about my age, and she had a wedding ring on. She looked like she probably had kids, and she was on her phone, and she was just flitting in between Facebook and her calendar and her photos and her email, and she wasn't taking any time. It was just constant, but there was no sort of method to it. And it made me feel quite agitated for myself. And I thought, God, how must that make you feel? You know, I'm only watching you doing it. And then the commute on the way home, I sat beside a bloke who was watching Sherlock Holmes on the iPlayer on his iPad. And he was playing solitaire at the same time on his phone. And I just looked at him, and in my head I said to myself, switch off and slow down. And then I was like, oh, maybe that's. I've had a sense for a while that there was something, a bit of greater purpose out there for me. That there was something more that I should be doing. And I thought maybe that's what it is meant to be doing. So I'd become quite interested in the digital detox world. In America, it's become quite fashionable for people to disconnect from their technology and go away and have a break on holiday. And there are special camps that have been set up, and people go away. You're anonymous. You don't talk about your work. You get given like a nickname. It's all very natural. You sleep in like huts, and you meditate, and you spend time in the open air. And I was really inspired by that. And then that just got me thinking, maybe there's something around the detox space that could be of benefit, and the meditation has had such a profound impact on me that maybe there's something in it. So within a couple of weeks, I was I'd researched it a bit. I'd spoken to a few people who were working within the training or the productivity sectors, and quite quickly realised that I should probably just go for it. So my friend Anna, who'd been working with me for years, came on board as a business partner, and another couple of guys that I know also came in there, sort of the business side of things, and we piloted what was it initially going to be an offline day. So the idea was that we wanted to work with the consumer and the corporate market, because we wanted individuals to be able to benefit from it as well. But as time passed, the more research we did, we realised it would probably be more beneficial for teams to experience the learning. So we did an offline day where we invited about 20 PR consultants down who worked for a couple of agencies, and they checked their phones in, and they had a day of workshopping the relationship they have with tech in their lives, starting to appreciate the impact that it's having on their well-being, productivity, their work-life balance. Some introduction to meditation, because with the rise in all this distraction and connectivity, and we're all over the place, there's also this rise in mindfulness, and for us it's no coincidence, because people are craving focus and clarity. So we did an overview on introduction to mindfulness, and then the rest of the day was essentially spent, phones were checked in, laptops were checked in, and people were allowed to basically remember what it's like to just live without those distractions all the time. So we had a creative cookery session, we had a session in the forest. It was just before Christmas, so people made Christmas decorations out of stuff that they found on the forest floor. We had time for reflection. We met back we lit a bonfire, and we met back at the end of the day, and people fed back how they felt, and it was really, really positive. And since then, that was in December, we've now developed it on the back of feedback, where we are tailoring shorter sessions of between 1.5 hours to sort of half day learning. And so far, so good. The take-up's been really positive, and we're delivering some stuff for Disney at the moment, and business in the community, and we've had meetings with lots of big companies, but obviously processes take longer in large corporate organisations, so we're sort of sitting on our hands waiting for I'm trying not to check my inbox every 2 minutes as I'm signing offline, but
I was going to say, is the request for shorter sessions because they don't want to go too long between checking their email?
No, well, that's actually very interesting. No, it's not. Although we'll see if that comes into it. No, it was more that the HR departments in companies said people don't want either whether or not it's down to senior management or whether or not it's down to the individuals, but people don't want to be out of the office for too long, so they want to learn stuff in short sessions.
Yeah.
So we've managed to be able to put something really tight together, and it's basically, what's the relationship you have at the moment? What impact do you think it's having? And there's so much research and evidence now. We were at a conference last week in London about e-resilience, and there are a lot of academics at the moment researching the impact that, and this is so important as well for people who are working from home, because there's quite a lot of isolation that can go whenever you're sitting on your own all day, and whenever email becomes your main form of communication, the emotional and psychological impacts that can have. A, if you're inundated, or B, if you're waiting around for people to get back to you, it's starting to people are talking about it. And from a personal point of view, I know this Shine Offline has come on the back of me knowing that I have not a problem with it, but I know that it's a very complex relationship. And now that I'm not working from home, I'm able to leave my laptop in the office every night, because if I take it home with me, I'll turn it off, but I'll probably turn it on 3 or 4 times throughout the evening. Yeah. Because the anticipation of knowing what's in the inbox is just so strong for me. Yeah. And I know that I'm not unusual in that way.
No, exactly. I mean, there has been lots of research, hasn't there, about dopamine hits of emails and messages on social media and so on that in your brain, the dopamine comes in. I'm not technical enough to explain how it all works, but that's the sort of hormone that is about sort of gratification, isn't it? So you open your emails and you get that hit of dopamine, and so you know that encourages you in a physiological way to keep doing it. So it's not just about thinking about it or not thinking about it or whatever. It's actually physiologically things are happening to you that you can't control, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
it's compared to this.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you carry on.
I was just going to say they've compared it to slot machine psychology.
Right.
It's the randomization of it. So whenever you play a slot machine, if every time you didn't win or every time you did win, your behavior would be different. But because it's random, you keep going. Yeah. And with stuff like mobile tech or any ICT, because when you go into to refresh your email to see what's there, it's like, who knows? It could be an amazing piece of work. It could be a really lovely bit of good news. It could be junk. But the randomization of it just encourages you to keep going, and it's like gambling.
Yeah.
There's a guy he's sort of like the godfather of the digital detox movement in the States. And he's been working within this. He came from the Silicon Valley and had a breakdown. And actually, he ended up having internal bleeding, but didn't realize because he was that busy on Twitter, and ended up changing his whole life and went on retreat for 6 months to India and all the rest of it. And he talks about being kind to yourself when it comes to the relationship that you have with your smartphone or your inbox or whatever, because the people who are now working for Google and Microsoft and all the other big companies are the people who used to cure cancer.
Yeah.
And they're the smartest people in the world, and their job is to make us distracted, make us want to connect all the time. So it's no wonder that everybody's sitting with their phones in their hands, because it's somebody's job to make us do that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I do a lot of stuff with technology. I use my phone a lot, and I believe a smartphone is actually one of the tools that is really important around sort of things like organisation, productivity, and so on, if used in the right way. And I think it's interesting. A lot of people who know me, probably family, would probably say that I spend far too much time on my phone. And that I'm addicted to it and all those other things. But it's interesting. I've through all the social and digital transformation, I've always talked about social and digital tools as being just that they are tools to do the things that you need to do, and that if you're using them in the right way for the right reasons and managing that, if you like, it's different to doing stuff just because, as you said, because it's sort of ingrained, it's subconscious or whatever. And I can still see that I do that. There are times that I check Facebook, and I know there's no need to. I could have just not. But I do think that when people who see me using the phone think I'm using it because I'm addicted to it, a lot of the time, as I explain to them, is, I don't know, if there's a bit of downtime somewhere, I'd rather just sort out a few bits and pieces whilst I can and there's nothing else to do, than spend, my voice is going, then spend, another half an hour later in the day catching up on emails that I could have dealt with when I was, I don't know, in the queue for the bank or something, sort of thing. And the thing is, you don't know when you're looking at people using technology, like you gave that example of that lady flicking between all her applications, and it sounded like that was completely random and was probably of no use and was probably quite stressful for her. Certainly was for you watching it. I don't, maybe she did have a strategy to it. It doesn't sound like she did, but it's. And
I think you've touched on such an important point, which is something that we are learning and appreciating more as the more people we speak to and the more research that we read. But it's such an individual thing. Yes. One person's filter. There's a turn of phrase, filter failure, where a lot of us don't have a good filter anymore, and we're just being bombarded with information. I have a really rubbish filter, whereas my husband has a really good filter, and I would be a much more extroverted than him. He would be more of an introvert, and his ability to be able to cope with information coming in at him, his ability to, like, for example, if he got an email come into his inbox from one of his clients about a new piece of work, he could quite happily he could see the subject line, but quite happily not click on it.
Yeah.
see what it says. And I'm like, are you mad? If that came into I'd be on it straight away.
Yeah.
It's just different personality types and how people cope with things are very, very different. But the flip side of that, we heard a piece of research last week that says that there are people who like to be this culture of being constantly connected. They like to be, they like work to be infiltrating their personal life. They like the blurry edges.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but we still, as human beings, we still need downtime, we still need rest, and we still need rejuvenation.
Yeah.
And as long as we're getting those, for me, I felt that the lack of pause and the lack of space and the lack of just boredom. And this is, Sadie's 3.5 months now, and she's at that age where, you know, she loves to watch her sea babies and she loves to watch her Disney movies and all the rest of it. But for me, I like to make sure that stimulation isn't constant, because I think it's really important for the brain and for patients and for lots of different personality traits and disciplines for us to have time that isn't constant entertainment and constant interaction. And I think that's where the meditation comes into it as well, because taking that time out, that 10 minutes out where, you know, you're in the doctor's surgery and you're waiting half an hour for the appointment, be very easy to sit on your phone. Whereas I've made a conscious decision, because I know that if I do that, it won't give me the downtime that I know that I need.
Yeah.
Just on a personal level. Yeah. I make a conscious decision, not necessarily to sit and meditate, but I might just literally just sit and look around me. And not do anything. Yeah. And I think it's very easy to pass judgment on people. As you say, friends or family of yours might look at you and make assumptions, but it's to do with your own conscious, mindful, managed approach.
To give my example of that, I might do the same as you. I probably wouldn't. What I might do is practice my French vocabulary using the app that I've got on my phone. I might read some articles that I've saved to read when I have an opportunity to do it. I might do my emails. I might go on Facebook. I might do my brain training app that's on my phone. You know, some of those things are things that I try and do as a routine for certain reasons. And it's not because I can't stop myself using my phone. It's because I've chosen, you know, to use it as a tool to learn French, for example. Exactly. It's very, very individual. So I'm really interested in what you now do then from a sort of routine point of view at home, bearing in mind you used to work from home, now you don't. And as you said, you don't bring stuff home with you as such. But with your husband working from home, I guess there's sort of potential sort of muddying of waters as well, sort of thing. So how do you sort of run that now? Do you have certain things that you specifically do at home and then work is very much in the office, or do you sometimes do things at home? I mean, you can't stop yourself thinking about work at home, I guess. How does that all play out?
Well, I have taken it to the sort of the nth degree, in a sense, that because I found it so challenging working from home, and now I'm in this position where I don't have to. I have created quite a big barrier between the two. So when I leave the office to go back, I'm sort of switching off, really. And when I get home, my husband will be there and he will be finishing off a piece of work, but then getting on the computer to go into the kitchen to start the dinner, and then going back so he'll jump up and down from the office, but probably once it hits about 6:30, the computer's off and then it's home time. Which works brilliantly for me. Now in the mornings, one of the things that I was a big victim of was checking the email the minute I woke up. Whenever I would have had it on my phone. And that's we've got some sort of very basic, simple tips that we recommend that people try and use if they feel like they're not in control of the tech and it's sort of running their day. So now I don't have email on my phone, but what I do now is I turn my phone off at night time, And I do find myself turning it on probably around 8 o'clock in the morning, but that's to see if I've sent a text message, if anybody's written back. It's never really work related. It's more a personal thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to be quite strict with myself, and keep it all quite separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you say, that is absolutely what people need to do if it's, if that works for them, as well as the people, as you say, that perhaps don't do that. It's funny, I listen to a lot of that stuff around sort of miracle morning and getting up early and having routines, and some people say, never check your email until 10 o'clock, and some people say, I do for this, that and the other reason, and it's interesting. The more you read about people's routines and hear what people do, the more you realise, as we've said, it is very much needing to shape something that suits you.
Exactly, yeah. One of the people who came on our pilot session got in contact the other day to say that because one of the things that we suggested is that people are using their phones as their alarm clock, their watch, their everything.
Yeah.
So we suggest that people get an alarm clock, so that wakes them up in the morning, as opposed to having to have their phone beside their bed, because the temptation to then look at your email or your Facebook before you've even put your toe on the floor is really high. Mm. And she sent me an email to say she'd got an alarm clock on a house phone, and it's totally changed her sleep. Yeah. And she feels really productive as a result and stuff. So that's the sort of stuff that I'm trying to do for myself as well, because I just know how much better my head feels as a result.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did a podcast interview right near the beginning with Jason Buckner, and we was talking about wanting to have your email so that you can work in it without it actually having new emails dropping in. And at the time I said there must be a way to do that, and I went off to research it, and I used Gmail, and I found an app called Inbox Pause, and that's what I actually use throughout the day, so that I don't have any emails coming in, so I can still work in my email, still find things, do things, send emails, but I can't actually see the emails that are coming in until I specifically decide that now is the time to deal with those. And I found that just so helpful, so good.
Well, it's like I know a company called Think Productive, who they're based in Brighton, and Graham Alcott set it up about 8 years ago on the back of his. Do you know them?
I know Grace Marshall, who works with him, and I've read his book and stuff, so yeah, I'm aware of them.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, the stuff that he's doing around email management is brilliant, and he talks about email should be one of on your list of things to do. Like the way that I'm now managing my work day is I have a list. On the left, I have the sort of subheading. So the first one's emails, the second one's calls, the next one's admin, and the next one's decisions. And they're the four that I'm working with at the moment. And within that, emails is one of the areas of work that I have to deal with. So I have to send some emails, deal with some emails, and what I'm trying to do is only go into my inbox to retrieve 3 times a day.
Yeah.
When I get in, sort of just before lunch, and then around about 3 o'clock. And the days I've done it, I felt brilliant, but I'll tell you now, it's really hard.
It's hard, isn't it?
See, when you're waiting for, oh my God, when you're waiting for people to come back to you as well, I'm refresh, because it's such a discipline, and it's such a way, and I've actually had to stick pieces of paper on the wall to remind myself the other times you're meant to be checking your email, because it's just this constant flow of distraction that moves you away from, where you're meant to be. So I do the same. I put my mailbox to offline, because I'm working on a Mac. And it means that, you can sort of get on with stuff and not constantly be looking up to see if another little window's popped up or a little envelope's popped up.
I think it's the single biggest thing that's made a difference to me in the last few months. And I read about it all the time. I knew, logically that it was a good thing to do, but I never bothered doing it because I thought it wasn't going to work for me. And actually, now having done it, I realise not only, can you do it and does it work? I can see how powerful it is. I've always worked on Inbox Zero, and that helps me to do it. I used to get, things would get out of hand if I was really busy, or, if I had particular days out of the office or whatever, it would all get out of hand. But I'm no further than a day away from sorting emails out all the time now. And then that's not because I spend all my time doing it. It's because of the fact that there's a process and a system, including, as you said, just checking at certain times. So I'm interested in your list of 4 things to do. Is that how you manage your to-do list every day?
At the moment it is, yeah.
And how does that connect up with sort of projects? Because the thing I find as a challenge quite often is that you've got big stuff that needs to get done, and then lots of little things that need to get done, and it's that whole important and urgent debate when you're prioritizing. How do you how does your system work with that?
Well, I still find that if I break it down into the type of tasks that I have to do, and work in that sort of batch working way, that it's just a much more effective way for me to work.
Yeah.
So if I had underneath admin, that's really research, reading, writing, anything that doesn't really involve communication. So I'll definitely find that regardless as to what project it's to do with, if I batch it all together and say that I'm going to spend the next hour on the admin section, it just feels like I can get into flow a bit better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we've only launched in January, so we're not being pulled by different clients in different directions. We've got a number of sessions that we're running next month, and we're actually in a preparatory stage at the moment based on a lot of the research that we came across at the conference last week. Once I have 10 clients needing serviced, whether this will work as effectively, but I think it will. It's back to that basic time management thing of batch working.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to try and keep doing it, and hopefully it'll just be the way that I'll work.
Yeah. So what about tools and apps that you use to help you? We'll say that smartphones aren't on that list.
Well, to be honest, most of my tools are tools that I use to encourage me to step away from the screen.
Right.
And we now integrate those into what we recommend people could maybe try out for themselves. So, like an example would be, I found myself every time something came into my head that required me to go online, like I could be sitting working on a project on the computer and remember that I've got to pay the childminder, or then remember that I've got to make a doctor's appointment, or remember that I've got to get my mother's birthday present, or whatever. Or it could be, I've got to email that guy back about thing. And I felt that I was constantly jumping away from what I was doing to go online to action something. So I decided to start to, every time something came into my head, I would write it down. So I got a little pad, and then I just started writing stuff down, and then that would become part of my batch working. So I would then, a few times a day, action those things by going online and dealing with them. So that's what we recommend people just have a little pad and pen and use that to try and keep their focus whenever they're working through the day. So that's one of my biggest tools. On the app side of things, well, I suppose I have used meditation apps in the past, which again helped for me to get, when I found myself especially feeling overwhelmed, or like my head was buzzing, or I just couldn't concentrate anymore. There are some Buddhify is a good meditation app, because it's got lots of different lengths of meditation depending on what your situation is, how you're feeling. You can choose from different lists. And Headspace is another one that I would have used before. But on the sort of work management and how I schedule myself and stuff like that, I don't really have any apps that I would use in that sense.
Good old pen and paper. That's the one that's coming up most often.
Exactly. Yeah, is it?
It is, yeah.
Are you finding that that's what people are saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little overlap in something like 22 interviews. There's been very little overlap. Google Calendar gets a mention regularly. The meditation apps do, and you mentioned John Kabat-Zinn earlier at the beginning. Kathy mentioned that in the very first podcast we did, so sort of quite a bit about mindfulness and meditation. But pen and paper, that is the one that's probably been mentioned the most for various reasons.
Well, that's good, because I thought I was going to be really weird in 1982. That's good, that makes me feel fine.
It's just retro, it's very modern,
Yeah.
So we talked about meditation, which is helping you with your relaxation, and you said a lot of the things that you do are about bringing you away from work. How else do you look after yourself? How else do you keep healthy? Assuming you do.
Well, yes. Well, I'm actually 7 months pregnant. So prior to this, I would never have gone for it. My colleagues just run the Brighton Marathon. I would never have run for more than 45 minutes, but I used to try and get out. Where we live, we're very lucky in that we're by the river, we're by the Thames, and we've got lots of lovely parks and things, so I would have tried to run. I now walk every day. It's 20 minutes to the office and 20 minutes back, so that definitely helps keep me sane. I find that some sort of, if I wasn't doing that, I just need to be in the fresh air, and that really helps set me up for the day. As I said, I'm married to a man who loves to cook, so we eat very well, which is brilliant. Apart from anybody out there who has ever had pregnancy nausea, I've never eaten so many donuts in my life. For about 4 months, I was donut dolly. And yeah, meditation is really important. I still go to a group on a Tuesday night for a couple of hours, and that's really great. And I suppose because I'm quite heavily pregnant and we do have a 3.5-year-old, recreation time is reasonably limited, but Ben and I still, if we get the chance, try and maybe drop Sadie to nursery on a Monday morning and go for a quick coffee by the river if we can, and make sure that we put each other, have time together. It's not necessarily watching the Game of Thrones. Has anybody seen it? We saw it last night back on season 6. So yeah, I'm very aware of just trying to keep that balance in there, and I'm so glad that the sun's shining and that we can be outside a bit more. Yes,
exactly. So what about sort of learning and doing things better? You've talked about going to conferences with work, so there's a focus at the moment on research as far as that's concerned, but sort of generally, what do you do to keep up and learn the things that you want and need to learn?
Well, I suppose the good thing for me at the moment is that because this topic of the switched on culture is it's in the zeitgeist at the moment, and a lot of people are talking about it and writing about it, and there's been quite a lot of news coverage around it in the press and on TV and radio. We've actually started to pull together a research folder that's from the press, because there's so much stuff coming out. So there's a really good variety. The thing for me, though, is how the hell do you filter through it all, because there's so much of it. Yeah. So that's sort of informal, just reading. I've joined a couple of LinkedIn groups. There's one for mindfulness at work, and they're really great. People post up articles and comments and research papers probably on a daily basis, so I try and take time to read up on that. But as regards formal learning, nothing at the moment. I would quite like to get back into that maybe some stage, but for now, it's just sort of keep my finger on the pulse by reading as much as I can, and when there's something that's been, like Radio 4 is quite good on a lot of the stuff that we do, so just listening out. Oh, and there are quite a lot of podcasts that are relevant to our sector as well. So just squeezing it in when I get the chance.
It's interesting when you say formal learning, so I've interviewed a lady called, I can't think of her surname, Michelle something, Michelle Parry Slater on a different podcast that I do for Engage for Success recently. We were talking about sort of social learning and the more informal learning, and how important that is for organisations, and yet we sort of tend to assume that you have to do a specific course, or as you said, something more formal. But actually, the things that you're doing are, the real sort of key ways of learning in this sort of information era, because there's just information available everywhere. Whereas, perhaps 30, 40 years ago, to get the real cutting edge information, you had to go to do a degree or a vocational training course or whatever. Whereas now, it's all out there. It's just about, as you said, trying to sort of wade through and work out how to find the best stuff and do what you need to with it, sort of thing. So when we were talking at the beginning, we're talking about sort of recommendations for sort of books, films, music, and you said there's a book that you would recommend, and I'm wondering if it's the one that sprung to mind when we were talking earlier to me. So go ahead.
All right. Book. Well, it's actually a book by a mindfulness teacher called Sharon Salzberg, who is American. And at my meditation group on a Tuesday night, people joke that I am probably on commission, because any chance I get to talk about her, I talk about her, because she's amazing. And she has written a book called Happiness at Work. And it's really brilliant, because it's all about bringing what are essentially Buddhist principles of compassion and kindness and empathy into the workplace. Okay. And she has done a lot of training with companies around these issues. And within the book, she just case studies the whole time. So literally within one page, she might talk about 2 concepts, but she's backed them up with 6 people that she's met through these workshops that she's run, and what they have found or what they've done in their work lives as a result. And the book also comes with loads of meditations, comes on a disc with loads of meditations. So when I go off on maternity leave, because I haven't got, I actually bought myself the audiobook, because she's American and I quite like her voice. So I've only listened to about the first 2 chapters. But when I go off maternity leave, my aim is to listen to the whole thing, because it seems to be, going back to the learning thing, now that I'm working in a completely different sector, I'm working in wellbeing, which I never did before, and I'm attending events, and I'm sitting in the room, and I'm so engaged, and it's so interesting, and it's so great to be sitting in a lecture theatre at a conference going, God, this is all really great stuff, I can't write it down quick enough. So Sharon Salzberg, from a learning point of view, has been absolutely brilliant, and I would recommend anybody to buy that book, because there's definitely a sea change. I was at an event last week that was organised by the CBI, and it was all about happiness. Do happy employees equal a happy, healthy business? And there was an awful lot being said about the importance of well-being, but not the importance of the bottom line, and about business leaders starting to just trust their gut instincts, that stress is a problem. We don't need facts and figures. We just need to recognise that it's an issue. We know it in our hearts. It's not about, it's not always about profits. It's about hearts and minds and stuff. And that's a lot of what Sharon talks about. It's about being more compassionate at work, being kind to yourself whenever you're under stress, but also thinking about how your colleagues are dealing with things and stuff. So that's my current top tip, although I haven't actually managed to read the whole thing. But
I never finish any of my business books. I always read the beginning, think they're amazing. No, I do occasionally finish them. It's a really good recommendation. Thank you. And I'll go and check that one out. I was trying to remember the one that I thought you might have been saying, and I've been laughing to myself that I have got it on my Kindle list, but I haven't actually read it yet.
What is it?
Called The Organised Mind, Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload, by a guy called Daniel Levitin. And he's a neuroscientist, and it's all about the overwhelm of society with technology, and how you can sort of find your way through that. If you understand what it's doing to us, and things like that multitasking isn't actually a thing. It's just switching quickly between lots of different things. So it sort of blows some of those sorts of myths, and it talks about why email is addictive. Which we were talking about at the beginning, so it might be worth checking that one out, and I'm just going to read it, having bought it and not got that far. I don't even read the first 2 chapters.
And what is it? The Organised Mind?
Yeah, The Organised Mind, Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload, Daniel Levitin.
Okay. So super. I'll check that out, definitely.
So what about if things don't go right then, if you have a bad day? I mean, you've talked at the beginning about 2 sort of fairly sort of traumatic times in your life, I guess, one of which spawned a new business. But what about if you just have a day that hasn't gone so well? How do you deal with that?
Well, how I deal with it and what impact it has are 2 very different things. My biggest problem really is my sleep. I can become sleepless quite quickly if there's stress going on, especially work stress. And I went through a CBT, reteaching yourself how to sleep.
Right. Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago. Yeah, it was really, really great. You basically have to completely suppress yourself of sleep. Work out how much sleep you're getting. Say you're only getting, when you total it up, you're only getting 3 hours. Well, what you need to do is so you're going to bed at 11 o'clock and you're getting up at 7, but you're only having 3 hours of sleep within that time. What you're meant to do is basically then retrain yourself. So only allow yourself to have 3 hours sleep. So stay up until, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And you have to go through this cleansing your bedroom. So one of the things is no tech in the bedroom and all the rest of it. So I went through all of that and I thought I was cured, and that was a couple of years ago. But now, being pregnant doesn't really help. But now I find as well, if stuff's on my mind that, or not necessarily where I lie down and I'm consciously aware of thoughts, it's more I just can't settle. And about a year ago, I started to get up and write, just free write, which I'd never done before. I know people talk about the morning pages and stuff, but I'd never done any of that. And I find that if I get up and sit and write for 20 minutes, the minute I put my head on the pillow, I fall asleep. So that's been really great for me as a massive coping mechanism, although sometimes I do lie there going, I don't want to get up and write. I don't want to get up and write. That happens more often than not at the moment. But generally, I suppose, again, because I'm in this situation where I'm 7 months pregnant, if I had had a bad day, maybe a year ago, I might have gone home and gone out for a short run, or tried to do something physical, whereas at the moment I can't in the same sense. I definitely find speaking to friends on the phone is a good thing, because we don't talk in the same way that we used to, and especially I've got a lot of old school friends and uni friends and stuff that I find a good hour and a half of the phone definitely puts things back into perspective, and sharing stories and what you've been up to. But apart from that, I think
that's a lot. You've got strategy.
Okay.
That's good. So what about then on a day where you end the day knowing you've had the chance to live more? So that's where I say it's about doing the stuff that you want to do rather than the stuff that you feel you have to do or you should do. What have you done? What does a day look like when you've lived more?
Probably finished early, because I've felt that I've completed what I needed to for the day, and collected Sadie from nursery and gone to the park, or there's a lot of ice cream in our house. We eat a lot of ice cream, and just had some time outside with her is probably for me the biggest thing at the moment, especially as the weather improves. It's so nice to not have to get home and shut the door and stick the telly on. We went through a jigsaw phase recently, which is lovely as well. But just spend a bit more time with her. Probably.
It's amazing, what spending time with a 3-year-old does for your sort of being in the moment, especially when you go for a walk. Oh yeah, it gives you a whole new perspective on walks, doesn't it? If you take a 3-year-old with you.
Amazing. Yeah.
Lovely. Excellent. Well, it's been great talking to you. It's been a little bit longer than normal because we've gone into a bit more depth on some areas, which I think is really, really helpful. So really appreciate you spending the time with me, Laura. How can people find out more about you and connect with you?
Well, on the website shineoffline.com, you'll find all the info about us there. And there's a team page, and the 4 of us have a little profile, and there's a little link into my story, my background, and sort of why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. But if anybody wants to email me, it's just laura@shineoffline.com.
Lovely. Thank you. Really appreciate you joining me.
Thanks, Jo. Take care of yourself.
Jo's Gems.
This is the part of the show where I do a recap of the key points of the interview, the stuff that I really liked, and the apps, books, music, tips and tools that were shared. This is for you if you heard something that you want to check out, but you couldn't write it down at the time. Hopefully I've got you covered. And this is the bit for the really time pressed. You can just listen here and get the gems from the interview, but of course I wouldn't suggest you do that and miss out on the great conversation that I had with Laura. The main focus of the interview with Laura was around the digital world and how overwhelming it can be and distracting, and how Laura's working in her business, Shine Offline, to help people to really switch off. So a lot of the discussion was around that. So we didn't really talk about many tools or apps because that sort of didn't fit with the theme. But she did talk about using a pad to note down actions, and that's what they help people with when they're doing their training, to say, if you just keep a little notepad, and as you think of things, as things pop into your head when you're doing various other tasks, to just note down what that thing is, so that they can keep focusing. You can keep focusing on whatever it is you're doing and come back to whatever that thing is later. So she says that's actually one of the biggest tools that she uses, a little notepad, to stop her from being distracted as she goes about, doing the work that she's supposed to do. And then, going back to whatever those things are later and addressing those. And I guess I sort of do that, not with a pad and paper. I do it using my to-do list. So as things pop into my head, I just add them to my to-do list, and then I go back and triage that list later in the day or the following morning. Again, to stop those things getting in the way and distracting me throughout the day. The two apps that we did talk about, though, were Buddhify, or Buddhify, I guess it's probably pronounced, which is a meditation app, and also Headspace, which we've mentioned before. So I'd suggest you have a look at both of those. We also talked, as I've said already, about controlling technology, and they, in Shine Offline, they have some simple tips that they recommend that people try and use if they feel they're not in control and that tech is running their day. And Laura mentioned Think Productive, which is an organisation run by somebody called Graham Cox, where he helps with email management, and she organises her to-do list into 4 areas, and one of them is email. She also has one heading of calls, another one for admin, and another one for decisions, and that's what she uses to manage her workload on a daily basis. And she says she only goes into her inbox to get her emails 3 times a day, so that she's not spending all her time in her inbox, which is something that I certainly recommend. I've been going on about that all year because it's something that I've known about for many years but not really tried or applied, and since I have started applying that myself this year, I've found it really making a massive difference to my productivity. So if you don't do that already, controlling the amount of times that you check your email during the day, then I'd suggest at least trying that before you try and do anything more sophisticated, because that does make a massive difference. Laura recommended a couple of books, one being Happiness at Work, which is by Sharon Salzberg, and she said that people sort of say that she's probably on commission for it, because she talks about the book all the time, because she really thinks it's amazing, a really brilliant book. And she said it's all about bringing what is essentially basic principles of compassion and kindness and empathy into the workplace. And the other book suggestion was from me, and that's something called Organised Mind, Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload by Daniel Levitin, who's a neuroscientist, and it's something that I'm reading currently. I'm about halfway through and finding it really interesting, thinking about how technology and the sort of always-on culture is affecting us. Laura mentioned John Kabat-Zinn, who Kathy mentioned in the very first podcast that I did. And she was saying that one night she was feeling particularly anxious, and she ended up Googling something like stress management, and a talk came up by John Kabat-Zinn, and she describes him as the sort of godfather of the of evidence-based mindfulness and meditation. And he was talking at Google at one of their conferences for their staff, all about the thing about living in the moment and the power of now. And Laura said she just found it really inspirational. Somebody who was always sort of worried about the future and worrying about when the next project was going to come in, when the next lot of money was coming in and so on. She said it was really interesting to start thinking about now, in comparison to just constantly be thinking about the future all the time. And she started a meditation sort of journey as a result of watching that talk. We talked, as I've said already, about dealing with that digital always-on culture. And Shine Offline, which is Laura's business, came out of her having a problem with that. So she started the business and stopped working from home, and started sort of switching off as much as she could and being very clear about when she's working and when she isn't, as a result of having challenges herself. But also now she's helping other people to do that. And she said when she goes home now, she actually leaves her laptop in the office, because she knows if she takes it home, then she'll probably will turn it on 3 or 4 times throughout the evening to see what's in the inbox, and actually by leaving it at work, that stops her doing that. And she talked about always on email, saying it's comparative to the slot machine psychology, that because it's quite randomized, the same as with a slot machine, sometimes you win or sometimes you don't win, and because it's random and you can't control it, but you know that next time you might win, you keep going, you keep playing on the slot machine. And she said that's similar to when you're looking at your email, you know, who's going to be emailing you? Is it good news? Is it about some work, or is it not going to be such good news, or is it just going to be junk mail or whatever? And that's what part of the reason why, you know, we can't stop ourselves looking at our email, because we're just sort of looking for that new bit of news that, you know, might be really good news, and we'll take the chance that it is, rather than not looking at our email for 5 hours because we've got other more important things to do. We had talked quite a bit about the sort of issue with digital and how to deal with it. Is all very individual. And certainly Laura says the more people they speak to and the more research they read, they realise that it is individual, and you know, filters, our own personal filters, vary. And she talked about how she doesn't have a very good filter, whereas her husband does. And so she said, you know, if he had an email coming into his inbox about a piece of work from a client and saw that had popped into the inbox, he could quite happily ignore it, whereas she, you know, would want to read it. And so that means that they have to then sort of bear that in mind when they're thinking about how they manage their technology and how they interact in the digital world. So, you know, Laura was talking about obviously avoiding that opportunity by leaving her laptop at work, because she knows that's how she can control it. Whereas if she had perhaps a stronger filter, she wouldn't need to do that, because she would quite happily ignore it. You know, even if it was right in front of her, like her husband can. So, you know, we talked quite a lot about how it is quite individual, and certainly, you know, Laura and my own personality is very different as far as the technology was concerned. That was a lot of the discussion. And Laura talked about some research that she'd just read about people who like to be in the culture of being constantly connected. And she said that they like sort of work and personal life to have blurry edges and to be sort of, for it to be quite integrated. And she said, you know, that's fine, but we still do need that downtime, that rejuvenation time. And it's interesting because that's something I don't really like the term work-life balance, because I don't think it is a balance necessarily. I think work-life integration is how things are nowadays, particularly with people who work from home. And it's about having that flexibility sort of both ways. So not trying to keep everything going exactly the same on both sides, if you like, work and home, because things, sometimes you have to do more work, sometimes you have to do, or not have to do, you want to do less work, and you want to do more family things, and it's about sort of integrating the two so that you can do the things that you want to do. So going back to, you know, power to live more, doing more of the things you want to do and less the things that you feel you should do. So how do you organise your life to enable you to do that? So it's interesting that the research is saying, you know, some people are wanting to do that, you know, and that's the sort of thing that I talk about. Laura talked about creating barriers, and I've already mentioned she talked about needing to create ways to stop herself from engaging with the digital technology, and you know, leaving her laptop at work is an example of that. And so, you know, she particularly says that she's created these sort of stop points so that she doesn't just keep working or doesn't just keep using the technology. And as we've said already, it you know, that will vary depending on the personality of the person and what they're trying to achieve. But certainly being aware of it and aware of where the issues can be and how you respond to them, and then making decisions based on that information, you know, is helpful, as opposed to just sort of letting it happen rightly or wrongly around you. We talked briefly about dealing with stress, and Laura talked about having a problem with sleep, and that she can become sleepless quite quickly, particularly if she's under stress at the time, and that she went through a CBT program to teach herself how to sleep a few years ago, and that was really helpful in actually helping her to get the sleep that she needs to get. So she was recommending CBT for sleep issues. The other thing that Laura does to help her to go to sleep, she says if she's struggling to go to sleep, she gets up and does some writing. She said, you know, some people get up and write in the morning, but, you know, she actually finds that if she writes in the evening, that helps her to then, when she gets into bed, sort of switch off quickly enough to go to sleep. So that might be an option, either just to prepare for bed, or it might be if you're having trouble sleeping, that might be worth thinking about getting up and writing something. And then finally, to contact Laura, you can just go to her website, which is shineoffline.com, and you'll find more information about them, her team, and their profile and their stories and why they're doing what they're doing. So quite an interesting journey that she's on, which has created a business from the challenges that she had and the strategies that she's taking to change her life. So I recommend having a look at shineoffline.com. And she also says she's on LinkedIn. And if you want to email her, then you can email her at laura@shineoffline.com.
Use your power to live more.
All this information is available on the show notes on the website, powertolivemore.com / in this case 23. If you'd like to sign up to get my weekly newsletter with more tips, strategies, ideas and tools to improve your power, you can do that on the website too. I send a newsletter out with various eclectic and sometimes random things and links and information that you'll hopefully find helpful in improving your power. So I recommend you do go over to the website, powertolivemore.com, and sign up for the newsletter there. And also, if you go to powertolivemore.com / focus, you can download my free report about how to increase your focus for better productivity. And please do come across and join the mailing list. I do also send a list of links for interesting reading on a Friday or Saturday for the weekend, which can be quite interesting as well. Some various articles that I've seen through the week that you might find interesting. So just go to powertolivemore.com and a box will pop up and you can put your details in there to start receiving those. Again, the link for this show is powertolivemore.com / 23. And we look forward to speaking to you next time.